Okay, class, the last video, which was General Reproductive 1, we ended with the bar body and the drumstick. So now we'll go to, in this particular aspect, what we're looking at is the formation of the testes and the ovaries. Okay? After fertilization, the gonads are associated, they're similar in both the male and the female. So the male is going to develop the testes, and of course the female is going to develop the ovaries. Now, as I mentioned, in somewhat, we all develop initially down the female line. And it's imperative that the Y chromosome has a gene known as the SRY. The SRY gene is located on the Y chromosome. It's sex-related Y gene. Okay? Sex region Y. And that particular gene produces something called testes determining factor. Testes determining factor is important in changing the development of a female to a male, basically, to say it in some way. And of course, all of this is due to hormones and things that are produced. Okay? So what will happen is this. The sperm meets the egg, you get the zygote. In this case, this is an XY. So in this XY, the Y chromosome then would have the gene SRY, which would give testes determining factor. So right now it's kind of an indifferent gonad. And then this would cause this testes determining factor, which would then give the formation of the testes. And in the testes, you'll have the seminiferous tubules, which will be the cells that will be imparted in making the sperm, the seminiferous tubules. And you'll really have two cells. You'll have germinal cells and non-germinal, what we'll talk about. The seminiferous tubules will have the cells that will be important with making the sperm itself, and then it will have some supporting cells known as Sertoli cells or nursing cells that will produce something called MIF, Mullerian inhibiting factor. Okay, and these nerve cells also do other things too. Then you'll have some interstitial cells, and these interstitial cells are important in production of testosterone. So if we look over here, here would be the seminiferous tubule. This would be a cross section of the seminiferous tubule. Right in here, these cells here would be the ones that are going to produce the sperm. Okay? These in-between areas here, these in-between, would be the nursing cells that are supporting these. So in other words, these cells here would be the ones in the tubule to actually start producing the sperm, and then which would be spermatogenic cells, and then these cells, these other cells up in here, would be those that support. Then in between tubules, you have interstitial cells, also called by eponym the interstitial cells of Leydig. And these interstitial cells, and why they call them interstitial, because they're between the two, they're not within. And these are the cells that actually produce the testosterone. Okay, so we go back here. So in this particular case, you have the egg and the sperm, and you get two X's. The sperm donated an X. And so then there's no SRY, no gene to do that, because I don't have a Y chromosome. And therefore, it will develop towards the ovaries, because you will not have produced testosterone, and you will not have produced something called Mullerian inhibiting factor that we'll see. So let's go a little further. So everything is indifferent. So it really depends on what that Y chromosome is going to do. Okay, so we go further. We have here, which we'll say, formation of testes. I'm going to shrink this down so we can read it. Formation of testes and ovaries. Soon after the production of testes determining factor in XY embryos, that's the male, the seminiferous tubules form. Okay? The germinal cells become sperm. Those are the cells up in here. The Sertoli cells, which I called the supporting cells or nerve cells, they are the ones that are going to support this, and they are the ones that are going to produce something called malaria inhibiting factor, along with doing other things. Then you have these interstitial cells, eponym, interstitial cells are lady, and those are the ones that produce testosterone. So you can see it's about, 6 to 7 weeks, about 6, you're still in the embryonic, remember 8 weeks, that you start to see this development coming from more of an indifferent stage of the gonads to this, based upon the production of hormones, primarily to convert the female system to the male system. Let's go a little further. So the Leydig cells begin to produce large amounts of androgen. Androgen is male hormone. Testosterone is the major androgen. That's about 8 weeks, like I said, after fertilization. Okay, so we're right at the edge of that embryonic period. This stimulates the production of the rest of the male reproductive organs, and the testes develop. They descend into the scrotum. Now the testes are pretty much developed in the abdominal cavity and start to be pulled down into the scrotum, something called the gubernaculum, that's pulled down into the scrotum. Why does that occur? Because the body temperature would not allow the production of sperm. It's too hot. So it has to be taken down into the scrotum, and if it's not taken down, it's called cryptorchidism, and when that occurs, you cannot produce the sperm. Now you also have a muscle called the cremaster muscle, and that cremaster muscle can pull up or relax if it's real cold, because too cold also will not produce the sperm. So you have to bring the testes into closer to the body, and that cremaster muscle, which is attached into the testes, if it contracts, it can pull it closer there. And then you have a muscle within the scrotum itself, some call it the dartos, and that muscle there will also shrink the scrotal sac down some, all in an attempt to keep the right temperature of the testes so sperm can be produced. Okay. Now, the formation of the ovaries. Without testes determining factor, then the XX embryos, which are the females, do not develop testes. The follicular cells, which are going to make the follicles, the egg production stuff, the ova, would then start around the second trimester. Okay. Now, in meiosis, what has to happen is, let me go over here, you have to, in the process that I want you to study on, let me actually, that's the wrong one, let me go to this, lost it totally, okay, go back, right there. What has to happen is that you have to, and this is something you want to study on, you have to separate and break the centromeres and pull to the cells. I'll say it like that. So in other words, this is in the separation point. If the separation does not happen, and everything needs to be divided up equally, if it's sperm to get 4 cells and so forth, but everything has to be divided up equally. So if something goes wrong, let's say it like this, and it doesn't disjoint, then 2 X's could be contributed and a Y, and so at fertilization. So in other words, one cell had these 2 X's, the other gave a Y, let's say. The 2 X's did not separate, so it would be X, 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 X. And then you get this called Klinefelter syndrome. Okay? If, however, there was non-disjunction, and the term is disjunction, and they did not separate in such a way that one cell did not get anything but one sex chromosome, then that's what we call Turner syndrome, okay, which is oftentimes written XO, XO, okay. So these individuals, because they don't have all that, are infertile. They have low levels of hormones that would be sex hormones and so forth. Again, something to look at under the meiosis aspect. Okay, between the 25 and 50 days, the male have two systems of ducts, the Wolffian ducts and the Müllerian ducts. Okay, let's go here. Now I'm going to go to this one here. That's another one. Go here, trying to. All right. So now what we'll have, we have two systems of ducts. We'll come down here. And these would be the ductal systems here. Move over. Okay. So as you look at this, here the Wolffian, always think that's male, the Müllerian is female. Okay. So initially you have both systems of ducts because everything is indifferent. The hormones have not come in to cause something to regress. Primary hormones is going to be Müllerian inhibiting factor, MIF, and also the testosterone aspect. So the key really is to make the male from the female, I guess you could say. Okay. So what will happen is, in the growing, the Sertoli cells that I mentioned, nerve cells, secrete Müllerian inhibiting factor. That is the factor that assists in the regression of the Müllerian ductal system, which is the female. This makes the Müllerian duct regress. See, in this picture here, this color here is the female, and this other color here would be the male. And if you have this, if you have MIF, I want this system to regress. See, right now you have both, and looking at this picture here, okay, testosterone from the, so I need the Müllerian duct regresses because of MIF, but I also need the testosterone to stimulate the production. So I need to back off the female and advance the male. To back off the female, you want the MIF. To progress the male development, you want testosterone. Testosterone is coming from the interstitial cells of Leydig, and MIF is coming from the Sertoli cells, which are the nerve cells. Okay? And so if you backed off the female, but you didn't have sufficient testosterone, you still would not develop all of these things that are located in the scrotal area. Okay? So here's what we're looking at. Try to enlarge it a little bit. Okay, in different gonads. This is early. Before you, okay, if you have testes determining factor coming off the SRY gene, then you get the testes, you get testosterone produced by the interstitial cells, and the MIF produced by the Sertoli cells. If there's none, then you'll develop towards the ovarian line. Okay. Now, if you're going to be male, then the Müllerian system, okay, which is the paramesoneric system. If you come over here, the paramesoneric system, you go over there. If you have that paramesoneric will start to regress, because what you're trying to do is develop the male, which is the Wolffian. And then the mesoneric, right here, okay, Wolffian, here's testosterone, and then that will start to develop those extra features. I need that testosterone. So this backs off the female, this advances, then that gives me the epididymis, seminal vesicles, all the other ejaculatory duct. And then the interstitial cells of Leydig come in and produce testosterone to get your prostate, the penis, and so forth. So you can see it's really everything is hormonally induced. Okay. So we're now to production of the external genitalia, which we'll talk on in just a second. just